Hello everyone, and today this video is a very important video. In this video, I will be talking about my predictions on the December SAT 2024. So December SAT 2024's predictions, I have 5 questions, my 5 predictions for what you will have on the reading and writing section of December SAT 2024. So here we should go about it. If you look at the first question, my first prediction is the punctuation question, right? And specifically in the punctuation question, there is one question that we tend to ignore, and that question is the usage of dash, right? There are many students who get confused about the fact that, when we should use dash and when we should use comma. And this question is a prime example of how we can understand about, how we have to use it, right? So let's talk about it. If you look at the question, it says, Lucy, all right, so just a minute. So it says, Lucy Tapahonso is the inaugural poet laureate of Navaja Nation. Her book, Saani Dahatal, The Women Are Singing, a combination of fiction and memoir, poetry and prose, serves as a testament to her versatility as a writer. Now, if you look at the options, question clearly tells us this is a grammar question. This is a standard English convention question. And from the standard English convention, if you look at the options, you'll find a semicolon, you'll find nothing, you'll find a comma, and you'll find a dash. So the difference in the option is telling us that this question belongs to boundaries, right? And boundaries, particularly, we are talking about what? We are talking about punctuations, right? And punctuations, we are particularly talking about dashes or maybe commas. So over here we have to judge whether we have to use a semicolon, whether we have to use a comma, whether we have to use a dash, or is there a possibility that we don't need a punctuation over here, right? So if you look at it, it says the women are singing. So clearly you have a dash over here. A combination of fiction and memoir, poetry and prose, serves as a testament to her versatility as a writer. So the sentence over here is her book, The Women Are Singing, serves as a testament to her versatility as a writer. This is what the sentence is. This is what we are talking about. But whatever is written in between, from a combination till prose, this is an appositive. This is a non-restrictive clause. Now, there are two options you have. You can either use 2 commas for it, or you can use 2 dashes for it. How will you decide? And obviously, if we know that we can use either 2 commas or 2 dashes, that means that we will not be taking option B as the answer, and we won't be taking option A as the answer as well, because semicolons are always used when you join 2 independent sentences. So you don't have an independent sentence over here before and after the semicolon. That is why you won't be using the semicolon over here as well. If you move on and if you look at the remaining 2 options, that is option C and option D. So you have to decide whether you have to use a comma or you have to use a dash. When you have to decide between that, when you have to decide whether you have to use a comma or a dash, you have to see what is written prior in the passage, right? So prior in the passage, if you look at it, you will find a dash over here like I mentioned before. So if you have a dash before the non-restrictive clause, if you have a dash before the appositive, then you need a dash after it as well. If you had a comma over here, then you would have used a comma after it as well. But because you have a dash over here, you'll use a dash after it as well, right? So over here, because you had a comma, you won't be using it over here. C won't be your answer. And with the dash, you only have option D. That will be or that can be your answer over here. So option D will be your answer, right? Option D is the best answer. The reason is that you have a dash over here. This is a common, very common misconception amongst students, that they do not understand the usage of dash. Another usage of dash is, yes, to digress and to describe something as well. But when you have a dash already written in the sentence, there is no confusion on the fact that the second part will also have that, right? So let's move on. So this is the next question type that I have, and the next question type that I have is from pronouns, right? So you have to figure out the right pronoun in the blank. So if you read the question, it says, American poet Emily Dickinson wrote many of her poems on scraps of paper, but she also took steps to collect these works. From 1858 to 1864, for example, she copied more than 800 of blank into 40 homemade booklets known as fascicles, right? So 800 of something. So if you take 800 of anything, it is understood that anything has to be what? That anything has to be plural, right? And if it has to be plural, whatever noun or whatever pronoun that you use for it also has to be plural. So because this is a question of pronoun antecedent, you have to make sure that the pronoun that you are using over here has to be a plural pronoun. You cannot work with singular pronouns over here, right? So you cannot take it as your answer, you cannot take this as your answer, you cannot take that as your answer. So this and that, they are pointers, so they very well won't be the answers over here. They are not pronouns at all, right? So you cannot take them as your answers. Just by the look of it, you can eliminate them. But between option A and D, you cannot take option D as your answer because it has a singular pronoun, and like we just studied the question, we need a pronoun that is what? That is plural. In pronoun antecedent, the pronoun should agree with the number and person of the noun that you're talking about, right? So because you're talking about 800, even if you add one off, right? If instead of 800 you had one written over here, right, then even then, you had to take a pronoun that has to be what? That has to be plural, because whenever you say of something, that something has to be plural. That is why you take one of it, right? And then if you're taking 800 of it, then obviously it has to be more than 800. It has to be plural, and it has to be a plural pronoun, right? So this again is a very common question, and I completely predict, and with a very strong belief, I think that you will have this question on the December SAT. So let's move on to the next question. Yeah, so transition questions. These are very important questions, and that is why I'm predicting that they'll have this question. And yet transition questions, they do take a toll at times. They are not difficult questions, but they can be tricky questions. They can give you a hard time at times, when you do not properly, especially if you do not properly understand the question and the relation between the two sentences, they might give you a hard time, right? So let's just read this one. It says, Arkansas aviator Louise Tharden was already a record breaker when she won the inaugural National Women's Air Derby, a race from California to Ohio in August of 1929, blank in December 1928. So look closely. The first sentence is talking about 1929. The second sentence is talking about 1928. So it has to do something with time. It has to do something with time. It is not opposite. The two events are not opposite. We know that they're just the sequential, right? So the first one happened afterwards. The second one happened earlier, right? So it cannot be, however, it cannot be as a result. So it can be next and it can be earlier, right? So if it were talking about 1930, or if it were talking about 1931 or something like that, then you might have gone with option C. But because it is talking about 1928, which was obviously before 1929, that is why you are going to take a word that talks about earlier, right? So the answer over here to your question will be earlier, right? So the best answer over here will be earlier. We have, when we talk about transitions, we can break them down into 4 parts, right? So transitions can be agreement or disagreement. The sentences can have agreement or disagreement. The sentences can be related in terms of sequence and order. They can be related in terms of addition and exemplification, and they can also be related in terms of cause and effect. But the transition word that we are using over here is the transition word that is related to sequence and order. So because it is of sequence and order, that is why it had to be A or C, and because of the reason we discussed, the best answer over here will be option A. Let's move on. Now this is a very important prediction, and again I have written this question in bold, and the reason for that is that many tend to overlook this question. Many tend to, because relatively the quantity of this question is relatively less, right? But you have to read a lot for this question. And in my opinion, these are one of the easiest questions that you'll get, right? So yes, you might think that these questions are the hardest ones, but the hard part for these questions is just the fact that you have to read a little more for this, because you have two passages. Yes, I am talking about cross-text connections. So in cross-text connections, you'll have two passages. You have to see what is the relationship between the two passages, and according to that relationship, you have to find your answer. So if you look at it over here, the first text, it says, most scientists agree that moon was likely formed after a collision between Earth and a large planet named Theia. This collision likely created a huge debris field made up of material from both Earth and Theia. Based on the models of this event, scientists believe that moon was formed from this debris over a course of thousands of years. So the first text tells us how the moon was formed and how much time it took for the moon's formation, right? This is what the first text is essentially all about, right? If you look at option 2 or text 2, it says researchers from NASA's Ames Research Center used a computer to model how the moon could have formed. Although simulations of the moon's formation have been done in the past, the team from NASA ran simulations that were much more detailed. They found that the formation of moon was likely not a slow process that took many years. Instead, it's probable that the moon's formation happened immediately after the impact, just taking a few hours. So if you talk about both of these two passages, the first passage talks about that the moon was formed in a very slow process, and the second had simulations and real time. It is saying that moon was formed relatively quickly, right? So there is a difference between these two passages, and that is what we have to find. But again, it is very important, before you move on or jump on to solutions, it is very important that you read the question and what the question says, right? So if you look at the question over here, it says, which choice best describes a difference in how the author of text 1 and the author of text 2 view the evidence for the formation of the moon, right? So we know this already, that the author of text 1 believes that the moon was formed slowly over a period of time, but the author of text 2 believes that it was formed relatively easier and quickly, right? So if you look at the options, the first option says the author of text 1 argues that the formation of moon occurred much earlier than. So it's not about the time, it's about the time period, right? So it won't be your answer. The author of text 1 suggests there is no evidence confirming the existence of Theia. Then the author of text 2, no. Author of text 1 clearly talks about it over here, right? So this again cannot be your answer. If you look at option C, it says the author of text 1 claims that the moon's surface is more similar to Earth's surface than the author of text 2 claims. So that is again not the discussion. The discussion is the time period it took for the formation of moon. So again, this cannot be your answer. If you look at option D, it says the author of text 1 believes that the moon formed more slowly than the author of text 2 believes, right? So this is exactly what they're talking about, that the time period that it took, that was slow. So the best answer for this question will be option D. And there you have it. If you understand the relationship of the passages, or in other words, if you understand what's going on in the passages and how they are related, before you move on to the options, it will be very easy for you to find out your answer. But if you're not clear about how the passages are related and you move on to the option choices, then there is a probability, there is a chance that you might get confused. So I am predicting that cross-text connection will be a very important part of SAT December. So might as well just go through it and practice it for whatever the questions that you have, right? So moving on to my last prediction for December SAT is the central ideas and details. So if you look at it, it says a common assumption among art historians is that invention of photography in the mid-19th century displaced painted portrait in the public consciousness. The diminishing popularity of the portrait miniature, which coincided with the rise of photography, seems to support this claim, right? So first it says that because of photography, the usage of the portraits decline, and then because of the popularity, when the popularity was going on, right, the diminishing popularity of portrait, which coincides. So what they are trying to say is that at the time where the popularity of portrait was decreasing, it was the same time where there was a rise in the popularity of photography. So because they are coinciding with each other, that is why this support might be all right. That is what they're saying right now. However, the photography its impact on the portrait miniature may be overstated. Now they're saying that this may be overstated. So, the reality might be a little different. So that is what we have to understand. Although records from the art exhibitions in the Netherlands from 1820 to 1892 show a decrease in the number of both full-sized and miniature portraits submitted, this trend was established before the invention of photography. So what they're saying is that although there was a coincidence, and they were coinciding with each other, but this trend of the diminishing popularity of portraits, this was not after the invention of photography. So it was happening even before the invention of photography. So what they're trying to say is that the invention of photography or the rise in the popularity of photography is not the only reason for the diminishing popularity of portraits. There might be other reasons for that as well, right? So this is what the answer should be. The question is, based on the text, what can be concluded about the diminishing popularity of portrait miniature in the 19th century? So we do understand that the rise of photography can be a reason for the diminishing popularity of miniature portraits, but there can be, or there has to be, other reasons as well, because they clearly are mentioning that it was happening when even there was no invention of photography. So if the photography was not invented and there was already a diminishing trend of the portraits, then obviously there has to be reasons at that time as well, and that obviously cannot be photography. So you need something that says that you have to have other reasons than photography that were causing this downfall, right? So if you look at option A, it says factors other than the rise of photography may be more directly responsible for the portrait's miniatures decline, right? So factors other than the rise of photography may be directly responsible for portraits miniatures decline. This is exactly what we are talking. Photography may be responsible, but there were factors other than the rise of photography that were responsible, and that is why this will be your answer. But we'll still look at the other options just in case we might get something else as well. So if you look at option B, it says, although portrait miniature became less common than photographs, they were widely regarded as having more artistic merit. Again, it's nothing about their merit. It was only about the diminishing popularity of the portraits and their reason. So that's not here in option B. We won't take it as the answer. The popularity of portrait miniature likely persisted longer than the art historians have assumed. So again, this is again not the answer. As demand for portrait miniature decreased, portrait artists have shifted their creative focus to photography. So it's not about whether the artist shifted their focus to photography. It was the reasons why it happened, right? So again, this won't be the answer. And the best answer for this question will be option A. So this is how we go about it. This is how we go about these questions. This video, the focus of this video was for you guys to take a hold of these questions, which are normally overlooked. Normally, we talk about questions. For example, command of evidence, we are very conscious about it. Purpose questions, we are very conscious about it. The main the main form, structure, sense questions, grammar questions, we are very focused about it, and we tend to avoid these questions. Obviously, yes, they have relatively, the proportion of these questions is again relatively lower than the other ones, but again, my prediction is that you will see, or you might see, these questions on your SAT in December. So prepare hard, keep practicing. If you need more help, if you want to go ahead, you can you can use our LMS as well. We have a recorded course over there, and we have more than 10 practice tests and those practice tests, all of those practice tests have video solutions, so you can go with that if you need extra practice. So if this video was all, and you can find the link to that LMS in the description below. And this video was all about how you can ace the December SAT, how your predictions can be for December SAT, or all the descriptions or the predictions about your December SAT. So I hope this video might have helped you. Thank you so much. See you again in the next video.